welcome to All Steelers Talk, your home for everything Pittsburgh Steelers, presented by allsteelers.com.
What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbein, joined every Friday by my main man, Derek Bell. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk or anywhere you get your podcast. Today, we're diving into a lot. Art Rooney spoke to a small group of the media yesterday and really gave more than I expected. It was my first time in one of those little sessions, won't lie. I felt like a badass walking in there. It was crazy. First off, let me start by this. You walk in, it's these two tables, okay? It's like a boardroom meeting, and you just sit down, and he comes, and he's escorted in. He sits down, takes off his jacket, looks at you, says like two things, and he's like, all right. And then you just start asking questions. It was the most mob thing I've ever seen in my life. It was awesome. But we talked to him a little bit yesterday. He gave a lot. We'll dive into that. Pretty much everything else. Your mock draft that dropped yesterday on Steelers Draft Talk. But first, it's a cold one. I went for a run this morning, and the wind was so bad that I couldn't feel my throat. I didn't know what was going on out there. It was not fun. But we're here. It's the end of January, so can't expect anything less. How you feeling, my friend?
Yeah, dude, I went to LA for only 3 days, but I guess because my body was getting used to that LA weather, 60, 65 during the day. And then at night it would get down to, only about, low 40s. When I've been walking out of work in the mornings this week, dude, I have been freezing, like shivering cold. And I'm normally somebody who likes the cold weather. But I've been telling people, like, man, I can't take any more West Coast vacations. My body's taking too long to adjust between that and the jet lag of me just being tired all week. Another thing that's not normal for me. So, but yeah, otherwise pretty good. I'm just trying to get myself back in my routine.
Dude, I cannot believe that you went right back to work from what's the flight, like 6 hours? You got a 3-hour time difference. I could only imagine what that does to your body.
It's 4.5. So, but yeah, it was definitely interesting. I definitely am glad to be home, but I'm excited for the weekend even more so than normal, just because, getting back in my routine, and I don't want to do anything this weekend. I want to watch some film. I want to hang out. I don't want to do anything that requires me to leave the house for longer than 10 minutes to go get food.
That's a good weekend. I'm excited for you. It would have been a good thing. You coming down to Mobile, you would have at least been adjusted to the weather. I'm going to get hit like a brick coming back because it always hits perfectly. You fly back into Pittsburgh, and then it's just like, oh, here's this ridiculous snowstorm and 0 degrees. Welcome back to the Burke. And I'm very excited for that. But at the same time, I could use some warm weather. So let's dive into a little bit of everything. I want to start with your mock draft. You and Nick dropped one on Steelers Draft Talk yesterday. It was a blast to listen to. I've never listened to a mock draft before, so watching your guys's, because I watch everything before it goes out, listening to you guys, watching you guys talk about that was pretty fun. You had a very surprising name that I laughed at heavily when you said it with that first pick, because I knew, like, as soon as it came out of your mouth, I was just like, this is his guy. Derek's always got a guy. This year, it's him. Go through a couple of those picks. Let everybody know kind of how you guys felt about that mock draft the first couple rounds.
Yeah, it was a cool little idea that we chopped up before we got going this week. I wanted to do a mock draft just because, like, I know the fan base in general just like they love mock drafts more than anything in this world. So everybody's been sending me their mocks. So I've been like, man, we gotta get something out on the pod about this. But basically, me and Nick did like dual mock drafts. So he did a separate one from myself, and then we didn't talk about our picks or anything because I wanted the conversation to flow really fluid. It's very interesting. We both took completely different paths, but we ended up with a lot of the same positions just because we see the needs similarly. But I picked Devon Witherspoon from Illinois at 17, and I talked about him a little bit on here, and I've talked about him a lot on the draft pod, but I really just think that he fits into what the Steelers are looking to do in the back end with, how much man experience that he has at Illinois. They're a very man-heavy defense. He's an awesome player, man. He's real physical, short area burst, can click and close with the best of them. But I love the way that he gets his hands in the passing lane. And I think, when you look at the Steelers, they want to play man coverage. they want guys that can get their hands on a football, and Witherspoon does that, better than really anyone else in this class. So I just think from his mentality, his physicality, I love I love Witherspoon's game. And then Nick, his first pick was Jordan Addison. I mean, we've talked about him at length on here, and we'll be talking about him a lot just because he's he's going to be linked to the Steelers, throughout this process for obvious reasons. But Addison, he's route running technician who's he's really fun to watch, and I think that he makes a sense for pretty much everybody just because of the skill set that he brings to the table.
I was really interested with Nick's second pick of Drew Sanders. That's a sleeper, I feel like. Good name, Alabama.
A lot of steam in the draft community.
Arkansas. Yeah, a lot of I feel like real, Noah Sewell's the big name, but inside linebackers always kind of fly under the radar. He's a good one. And to land him with the 32nd pick, I thought was not bad. I didn't think that one was a bad one.
Yeah. Sanders is a really interesting player. He really explosive. And, Arkansas used him in a lot of different ways. He, got the chance to rush the passer a lot, which I always feel like is interesting for inside linebackers. Like, how are they deployed in obvious passing situations? Some of my favorite guys over the last cycle or two have been guys that even goes, guys that kind of kick out to edge, or they end up blitzing on kind of some of those exotic, like A-gap mug looks. So, I definitely see the intrigue with Sanders' game. I'm hoping to finish up my eval on him and Trenton Simpson here in the next couple of days, because I'm seeing those are familiar names for me. It's so funny. I'll post like a draft tweet, like a clip of a player, and it's like almost every one of them end up getting a screenshot of like a PFF mock generator. So I do appreciate you guys. It's pretty fun. So.
No, yeah, it was cool. It's still early for draft season, I feel, but it's like, the Mobile's the first step, and then you keep it going, and then you keep it going. You went wide receiver deep. You went left tackle. What, in the third round? No, second pick of the second round.
With my second pick. Anton Harrison, he's a really interesting player. Really, really good athlete. Just love the way that he moves. I think he gets out of his stance really well. I think he can mirror fairly well. I love the way he gets to the second level. It was a game that I didn't watch before I was getting ready for the mock, but I watched another Oklahoma game. I think it was the Texas game from 2 years ago. I was actually watching Marvin Mims again, but I watched him get to the second level and just seal off like 2 huge run plays, one for Caleb Williams, one for their back last year. But that's something I really like about his game, is how well he gets to the second level. So he's got some technical stuff to work on. He's not as consistent probably as you'd like him to be just in his technique, but a lot of tools there. I saw somebody in the comments asking me about Broderick Jones. Jones is similar, where I think that hand placement, hand technique's not always where it needs to be. Sometimes I'll have his hands too low. Sometimes like the hand placement will be too wide, but Jones is awesome when he gets out in space. I mean, he's like a road grader. Whenever, Georgia, they like to get him on the move. They pull him and different things, and he targets smaller defenders really well in space, which I like. So Jones is another guy with a lot of tools that's going to go somewhere in the top 20, top 25 of the draft process. Somebody else has said, I think people are undervaluing Clark Phillips. I think he's top 3 corner in the draft off production. Nick had Clark Phillips in his mock last night. He was Nick's, I think, third pick.
Third, I was going to say, it was round 49.
Yeah, Phillips has some. He's definitely some. Asante Samuel Jr. Nick's talked about them kind of being similar with smaller corners with slight frames, but really, really good tape. I loved ASJ coming out. So I've been a big fan of Phillips for a couple of years as well. I do think he's going to get pushed down draft boards because the corner class the draft overall is probably below average in terms of what I've seen, but the corner class I think is pretty good. It might not have the top tier elite guys that last year did, but I think it's as deep as like we've seen in a long time. So I think he may get stuck a little bit in that regard, but he's a good player.
It's a good thing for the Steelers though, because it's deep draft is very needed for Pittsburgh. They need even if they do sign Cam Sutton, and me and you were kind of going back and forth, and we've talked about this before, even if you do sign Cam Sutton back, you need another corner. Like you can't walk in there. Even if your expectations for Levi Wallace is to start again, cool. You still need another corner. Like you need that third corner. Zero questions asked. I think that's very high on their priority list. Which is a good way to kind of transition here. As we talked about, Art Rooney spoke yesterday, gave a bunch away. Talked about Matt Canada. I definitely want to get into that. He talked about Brian Flores. I definitely want to get into that. Possibly hiring another offensive assistant. Want to get into that. I think the big thing, just to stick onto the NFL draft, yours truly asked, because I had one question. I went in there with one thing that I wanted to know about. It is the first time that Art Rooney and Mike Tomlin get to build around a quarterback in 20 years. Are they going to do it? Is that the top priority? You hear it all the time. What's going on? Like, you got to build around a quarterback. Mm-hmm. I think everybody's got the same question. Are you going to do what the Bengals did? Are you going to do what the Dolphins did? Is that the plan of attack? So I asked straight up, are you going to, is building around Kenny top priority? He came back and hit me with, like I said before, I think we have a lot of good young players on offense. We may have a lot of pieces around him that we need. Now, you can always use another piece, and we'll be looking for the other pieces. But I think we have a pretty good young group there. We'll have an opportunity in this draft that we've got some high draft picks we can utilize. In general, I think what we're bringing back next year. In general, I like what we're bringing back next year on offense. Immediately, my mind went, well, Jordan Addison's not coming to the Steelers. That was my first thought. I was just like, well, that's not what you're going to do. And then he went on a little bit later. Somebody asked him about the offensive line, and he said, I think that we did get better as the season went on, and that's encouraging, but we're not going to say we can't improve. I mean, we're going to look for ways to improve. I think overall consistency is something we can do better with. We had some guys that were a little inconsistent, and we've got to do better in that regard. I don't know. My mind immediately went, and maybe I'm wrong here, Jordan Addison is not the guy. It's possibly going to be an offensive tackle, and I would say offensive line is where they're going to hammer on offense this offseason.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I mean, we got some new, some new faces kind of at the top of the pecking order in the front office with, Andy Weddle and then Omar Khan with Colbert's retirement post-draft last year.
Dude, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no, you're good.
Art said something like, oh, things are changing the way that Omar and Andy do the draft process. And somebody's like, can you give us an example? And he was like, I'll just let them do the talking. I was like, all right, sounds good. You got nothing.
I mean, that's definitely going to be, something to watch for, like how their philosophies change. And I'm excited about that aspect of it, the unknowns, us figuring out kind of their tendencies and things like that. I do think that the offensive line class in general is probably like average to below average. We're not going to see near the amount of first round offensive linemen that we saw last year. I think there was like 8 or 9
there was a
linemen taken in the first round last year. That's not going to happen this year. I think it's probably more likely to be about 4, maybe 5. But overall, I mean, there are still some guys that I really like and guys that I think that could help them even year one. I do think that the Steelers are in a unique situation, though, because it's really not often that you bring back all like 10, 11 of your starters, but that's really where the Steelers are at. I mean, technically the slot receiver is a starter because of how much 11 personnel they play. And like, I don't think that Steven Sims is going to be the starter next year in that spot. So maybe 10 out of 11, but you do get the sense that this is going to be what they finished the season with last year is going to be the meat and potatoes of their offense next year. They probably still do need to upgrade at least one piece on the offensive line, whether that be left guard, left tackle, and then they're going to get a slot receiver at some point during the offseason as well. But I think that he talked a lot about, finishing the season strong and that kind of upward trajectory that he felt like they were on. They're going to try to use that combined with the youth that they have on that side and just hope that natural progression kind of helps them take, themselves over the top.
Do you think that there's enough natural progression left though with those two guys? It's really just Dan Moore and Kevin Dotson. That's the only ones we got to worry. Like even if
Yeah.
Chooks is maxed out, he's here. There's no questions there. He's the right tackle. It's the other two. It's the other side of the offensive line. But this is year 3, year 4 for Kevin Dotson. Like what? How much better can you get? How much more progression can you have?
Yeah, I still think in order for this to, because here's the deal too, like with Canada being brought back, and we've talked at length about that decision. I know he talked about that a little bit
Yeah.
as well yesterday or the day before, but I definitely think the expectation for this offense has to be that it's going to be a good offense. Like it can't just be below, like it's been below average to bad most like the entire time he's been here. They have to be good in order for like Canada to get another year. So we need to see like a good jump from this group and build off how they finish the season. And I think in order to do that, you still need an upgrade on the offensive line. Like I'm not saying that it's absolutely a necessity that they have to upgrade over both of those two guys, but I think you need to upgrade one of the spots and then add like another dynamic receiver, particularly one that can play in the slot. And I think they're going to have the draft capital to do so. It's just a matter of, making sure the board falls where they need to.
The draft board better than most. Do you see, like, if they wait, how far can they wait it out before you're like, okay, they have completely screwed themselves on an offensive lineman?
On offensive linemen, I think that there's a chance that Broderick Jones is there at 17. I'd be pretty surprised if Paris Johnson was, but
you don't think you could go past 17 before it's like a dramatic fall off?
I mean, those are definitely like the top names that I like. I mean, I'm a little bit higher on Darnell Wright from Tennessee. Like I think he's definitely a top 50 guy. I've already talked about Harrison from Oklahoma, left tackle. The interior line class is not great. It's a little difficult to find like a center that I feel really good about going in the top like 100. There's probably only one center that's going to be selected that high. Even guards, like I consider Skoronski a guard, and I would have no hesitation with the Steelers taking him if he was there at 17. He's played left tackle his entire career basically at Northwestern, but I think the arm length, he's only got like 32-inch arms, and that's going to be below, that's going to be a historic outlier for the position. And I'm just not sure if NFL teams are going to be willing to make that kind of risk in the early portion of the draft. But I definitely think he can play guard, and I think he'll be a freaking good one too. So, I mean, if the Steelers kind of fell themselves in and like he fell into their laps, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'd be down for that too. So I don't necessarily I try to make sure that I'm not getting myself like pigeonholed or like hyper fixated on a single position that they need to take first, just because for one, we still got free agency too. So like, we don't even really know what the roster is going to look like come April. And then I just think that that's like something we do sometimes a little bit too much, like maybe in the media or fan base wise, just get like too focused and fixated on one player or one position. Like there's a lot of ways to make this thing work. And even though I do think that the draft overall, like at certain positions, like receiver is not as good as it's been in the past couple of seasons, I do think that there are still good players to be had, even if they don't get their hands on like Jordan Addison at 17. There's a lot of ways they can go and still, come away with a good product at the end of, draft weekend.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about wide receiver. Like a good wide receiver would be fine. But if you added a mid-tier wide receiver to start in the slot and then hope for the best in Calvin Austin and then, kept Steven Sims and kept Gunnar Olszewski, and, I think you can make that work and it'll be just fine. Plus you have Connor Hayward, who's pretty much a slot guy as it is. Pat Fryermuth's a guy that could bounce out. You got to get another tight end in there somehow because those two are practically wide receivers as it is. Offensive line is a concern for me. But again, just like you said, free agency is a real thing. That's how they built it last year. Wouldn't be surprised if they did it again this year. Like if you're going to toss money around there, you might as well go toss it out there, get some really good left tackle. That's proven to work for many teams in the past. I mean, you could look at everybody literally everybody in the championship games this weekend. And at least half of them, I guess 2 out of 4. So really, no, maybe just one. Is it really just Trent Williams? Am I trying to make a point about signing left tackles? And it's
Jonah Williams, he wasn't. I mean, he was a guy that the Bengals drafted
They
and
drafted
groomed,
him.
and
Yes,
then
but so did Lane Johnson was drafted in Philly.
yeah. I mean, Philly's
Yeah.
have
So
always invested
yeah.
at
No,
that position too. But I do like I think that you can make that argument a couple different ways, right? Like I think that there's not just one way to bake a cake when it comes to like roster building.
yeah.
But I think that I see this argument a lot on Twitter. You can't take a receiver that high. They need to, invest first in the offensive line. Well, like the truth of the matter is, man, once you get to this point in the season where we're talking about conference championship teams,
Yeah.
divisional round teams, usually those teams have both.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you can even look at the teams that are playing this weekend.
Yeah.
San Francisco's offensive line is really good. They got probably one of the
Crazy good.
best overall players in football, Trent Williams. They're going up against Philly, who has a top 2 at worst offensive line. Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson, guys that they've invested in and developed.
Yeah.
Even Cincinnati, like they went out and spent a bunch of money last season, and they've had some success. Kansas City has an elite offensive line, but I also think you can make the point that all those teams have high tier weaponry, except maybe Kansas City. They got a lot of different flavors, maybe not.
Dude, but even Kansas City, they got the best tight end in football, and they went out and spent some money on guys like Juju Smith-Schuster and 7 different running backs to make sure that they had options.
And you look at what some of those decisions to go out and get some of these playmakers have done for their young quarterbacks. Like, it's funny to think about, but like during the draft process last year, everybody was thinking that Philadelphia was stockpiling all these picks. They got 2 first-round picks this year. Everybody was like, well, they're doing that just in case they got to go get a quarterback because Jalen Hurts not the guy.
No,
they go draft Devontae Smith last year. And then they go make the trade for AJ Brown, and boom, Hurts explodes. He's an MVP candidate. Now we're talking about giving him $50 million a year on a contract extension. So
with 2 draft picks.
Yeah. And then you look at Cincinnati, they're back-to-back AFC championship games. They got the best receiver core overall in the league, 1 through 3. San Francisco's weaponry, no disrespect to Brock Purdy, but between him and Kyle Shanahan, that's an embarrassment of riches over there with George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
There's more ways to get this done. And just I think, a lot of times it's semantics on how you get there, like what you should prioritize first. And I definitely get the arguments for both sides. I'm just saying, like, when we talk about trying to get the Steelers to play again this weekend, conference championship weekend, you're going to need both. Like, it can't just be one or the other. So, unless you got an elite quarterback, and then it might be a little different.
And the Steelers don't have any of the 3. So
not yet,
yeah. So they are definitely in trouble. But I will say this: I think that the Steelers have weapons. Like they have, if you're gonna nitpick on one of them, walking into 2023, I feel pretty good about the combination of George Pickens, Deontay Johnson.
They got a good base.
They got a good base. Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Pat Freiermuth. I mean, Connor Hayward proved to be a pretty good pass catcher out there. It's a good base. It is definitely a good base that in a year, maybe at the end of this year, this upcoming season, you feel are like, oh, okay, well, some of these guys are elite. Like some of these guys have entered that territory where that's where I think that you could toss a left tackle ahead or an interior lineman ahead of a skill position, because if you're baking the cake, you have the base, and your glaring weakness is not Steven Sims. It's penalties on the offensive line and sacks, and Kenny will help that. I think that's a big thing that has to be misunderstood, or that it is misunderstood, is that Kenny's second year, he'll get hit a lot less because he'll do a lot smarter things with the football, and that'll help the offensive line. And I think we'll see improvements either way, whether they make a change or not. But I think that you gotta make a change. You have to make a change.
I do want to answer this question from McGill.
Yeah, do it up.
Thoughts on the tight end position? Do you still see the Steelers drafting a tight end in the top 100? Was Zach Gentry a free agent? I mean, anything's possible. The tight end position is actually really good this year. Normally, we only get like a couple starting caliber tight ends, but I think that the position this year is pretty solid, and I think that there's going to be probably 4, maybe even 5 that go in the top like 50 to 70 picks. So, there's a lot of names out there. Michael Mayer is the top guy, I think, in this class. But I did a scouting report on Darnell Washington. If you're from Georgia, if you're interested in that, you can check out the NFL draft tab.
Dude, I just want to go. I just want to go interview a guy who's a foot
Oh
taller
yeah,
than me.
he's
Taller than me.
he's on my list for the combine, man. I've already got a couple guys that I've really enjoyed, like film wise, that I have specific questions for, and Washington's going to be one of those guys. But there's other players too, like past that. Like I've talked a lot about Dalton Kincaid, who caused a big uproar because Daniel Jeremiah had him as tight end 1 yesterday on Twitter, and it was
did he really?
out. But I have talked about him a lot at length on the draft pod. But he's a excellent receiver, man. Like the dude just gets open and he never drops passes. He dropped 2 passes like his entire time at Utah. He had like a 200 and something, like 260 or something like that game against USC this past season. That was unreal. He's an awesome player. Guys like Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave is going to be at the Senior Bowl. So there's a lot of talent. I don't know if the Steelers are going to be willing to pay that kind of price.
No, they're not. They're not.
But I do think the position itself offers a bunch of talent.
I agree, but I don't think that I would see if I could see the Steelers. I think Zach Gentry is going to come back. If I had to put my money on a move, I would say that Zach Gentry doesn't have many targets right now. You know, I bet you there's not a bunch of teams out there looking at him saying we're going to pay Zach Gentry a boatload of money. He fits well in Pittsburgh's offense. He's going to get more passing targets here than anywhere else because Matt Canada loves his Zach Gentry tight end screen. Loves it. He cuddles with it at night. He feels real good about it. I would imagine Zach Gentry comes back, and I feel good about that. I think Zach Gentry is good for what he does here. But if they didn't, it would be cool to get a flashy tight end. It's been a minute, you know, like Pat Freiermuth was a good one, but you kind of saw that one coming. Before Pat, it was a long time of Ladarius Greens, Nick Vanette's, Vance McDonald's, just filling the void anywhere that you could possibly go.
Yeah, it's hard to get a tight end, man. Like I said, we don't get very many starting caliber tight ends, and that's just because you know, even like we've seen Pat, you know, struggle in the blocking department, but I mean that's the norm these days. Like a lot of these guys, they grow up with 7-on-7 football. Many of them when they're in college, you know, are basically detached receivers, you know, playing a lot in the slot, playing a lot out wide.
There's always the Zach Gentry to a Pat Freiermuth in college too. You know, like there's always the guy that they'll just send it. Because in college, you don't have to disguise it as well as you do in the NFL. Like you'll just toss him out there and be like, okay, you're 6'8", 270 pounds. You are doing nothing but blocking. And that is your job here at Penn State, you know? And then Pat Freiermuth, like you said, is just basically a detached wide receiver. I agree. It would be cool though. I'd be all about that life. Tight ends are always my last thing I'll say about tight ends. Always my favorite interviews. Always super nice guys. I've never met a mean tight end in my entire... People have bad things to say about Vance McDonald. He was nothing but nice to me. Whole time he was there. So, no issues with tight ends. I'm all about tight ends. All right. Other thing I want to talk about coming out of the Art Rooney presser the other day, or the Art Rooney media session the other day, was Matt Canada. He pretty much said, you know, the reason we kept Matt Canada was because of Kenny Pickett. The exact words here, I'm trying to find them. Nope, I'm too far down here. I have the transcript in front of me for you guys thinking that I'm just staring into nothing. So he was asked if the improvement on offense specifically was the reason that the team decided to stick with Matt Canada for another season. Rooney responded, yeah, I think so. I think we all like to see the improvement. With a rookie quarterback, they seem to work well together. They built a good working relationship. To sort of start over again with a new offensive coordinator could wind up back in the same situation again, where the first half of the season, you're breaking in a new OC. So we just felt like there's enough there to build on that. We want to continue to keep that group together. Two things here. One, that's just a terrible excuse. And two, it certainly did sound like there was a lot of, maybe we all overreacted about Matt Canada. It certainly sounded to me like the Steelers were as iffy on Matt Canada as the rest of us were this entire season. But they, like I just said, they have a terrible excuse to keep him. They've just decided that that's the reason to keep him. Because we talked about it before. Like, okay, if it doesn't work out this season, So you're just willing to take 2 years off instead of a half of a season. Just that one doesn't make sense to me. But that's what he said.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the rationale behind it, I don't I'm not on board with the reasoning. We talked at length about that last week. I still just think that you're setting yourself up for disappointment. I think that you're
Huge
going to end up
disappointment.
in the same spot this time next year, but ultimately they're leaning on familiarity and trying to continue some of that trajectory that they finished the season with. One of my biggest concerns, I brought this up last week too, is just making sure that we're not settling with decisions like this. And I think that that's ultimately what's happening. The thing that concerns me is I think some of those game-winning drives late, to beat Baltimore, to beat, the Raiders, ended up kind of securing his job when, I definitely think, finishing the season 7-2 or whatever they finish is definitely something to build on.
Yeah.
It's just, you look at the quarterbacks they faced in the second half of the season. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. I'm just being realistic about how to look at it and play anybody.
No, dude, they didn't play
they got
anybody
really
at
lucky.
all the second half of the season.
You look at just the guys that they played, like some of the better quarterbacks they played during that stretch. Andy Dalton probably won't be a starter next year. Derek
What do you mean probably won't be a starter next? He won't be a starter next year.
I didn't think he was going to be a starter this year, but
He
yeah,
was competing with Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to be he's not going to be a starter next year. Derek Carr's not. He got benched shortly after. He's going to be a starter next year, but obviously he's not. A top 10 guy or anything like that. You look at the guys that they played. I guess what I'm trying to say is squeaking out those like 16-13 or 20-16 victories is good. And I think you can learn things from those wins. And it's always better to win ugly than lose in pretty fashion. But at the same time, it's like, next year, you're not, I don't think you're going to have the opportunity to play Tyler Huntley twice. I don't think you're going to have the opportunity to play, Marcus Mariota down the stretch, like those type of guys. So dude, I think
down the stretch, you could even look week 1. You're not going to have the opportunity to play Joe Burrow 4 days removed from appendix surgery.
So there's that aspect of it, but we'll see how it plays out, man. I think we've exhausted a lot of time and energy into Matt Canada stuff, and it is what it is. He's coming back, and I know like he's a real controversial person because the offensive coordinator always is, but I am hopeful that, at least the working relationship between him and Pickett, they'll have a full offseason to figure out, what each of them liked last year and how they can continue to build on the offense. We talked last week, would love to see more play action and stuff like that. So we'll see if anything changes, especially like once we, fill out the rest of the roster and see kind of who's going to be involved or what changes they make. But, overall, bring back the offensive coordinator. You got the entire offense coming back. It's a lot of continuity and a lot of youth. So we'll see how much, upside or development there is with that group.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. You always try to finish that off with every time you talk about Matt Canada. By the end of it, you're just like trying to get some positivity out there.
I try, man. I do my best.
What I wanted to go off of that with is that he was also asked about a Brian Flores type position, a senior assistant on offense, and he said, "I wouldn't take it off the table." And to me, that's the perfect situation for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that they're actually considering it because if Kenny Pickett or if Matt Canada doesn't work out, you don't want to take that risk of having to reset with an offensive coordinator. Best way to do that is not to go replace him with your quarterbacks coach who hasn't been an OC in 10 years. The best way to do that is to have a Brian Flores-like guy in the building, somebody with experience, have them, work together. And then if it doesn't work out, you get rid of Matt Canada. You already have a guy in place for the season after because they wouldn't fire Matt Canada in the middle of the season. It just won't happen.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't work out and you got to replace him at the end of the season, there's no transition there. It's just, hey, here, let's work with whoever. The name that comes to mind, obviously, is Byron Leftwich. Is that a move that makes sense for the Steelers? Is it a bad idea considering he had a bad season with the Buccaneers? Or, you just look at it like that would make a lot of sense?
I don't really particularly have strong feelings either way. I mean, I think in general, anytime you can add experienced coaches, and I would consider Leftwich at this point
Yeah, definitely
experienced because he's
experienced.
worked under, BA was one of the most respected guys around the league. So I mean, I think, having that experience of working with BA, he has a relationship with Tomlin, considering he played here for several years. I'm for it if that's what ends up, taking place. I don't know
Yeah.
what Leftwich's plans are. I don't know that he's going to get another offensive coordinator job this cycle. But we don't really know that because there's still so many open jobs available. So who ends up filling the head coaching vacancies? What links do they have to their potential coordinator spots?
Yeah, true.
We probably won't know that for a couple weeks. Now, I don't think this is going to be a Flores situation where, you're
No, you're not
months
going to
into
get
the
a former.
offseason, and then
Yeah.
I don't, it's not going to be like that. But Leftwich will find a home somewhere. I'm not opposed to adding another guy with play calling experience. I do think that he was at least partially at fault with some of the stuff last year. Some of the comments that he was making after some of those Bucks performances on offense were really
Oh, I
eye
actually didn't hear any of those.
eye opening to me. Yeah, just like I remember one, and I don't want to. I'm gonna end up misquoting it because I don't know the
It's all right.
exact
Everybody take this with a
verbiage.
grain of salt.
Yeah, but it was basically they asked him about the lack of play action in their offense,
Yeah.
and he was talking about how they couldn't run the ball, and like analytically, we know that that does not matter. Like you don't have to be a dominant running team to be a good play action team. It help? Absolutely, it helps to have a great back there and
Yeah.
a strong running game to lean on. Teams do that every year, but you don't necessarily need a dominant run game to incorporate a play action pass game. It's just not analytically or statistically proven anymore. So that was just like one of those things like, dude, it's 2022. Like, how the hell are we still doing this?
Yeah, what are we doing?
But yeah, I mean, I like Leftwich. I think he's a good dude. And I'm all about, we looked at, we can talk about Tomlin's lack of a coaching tree or whatever, however, but they've never been in a situation where I feel like their coaching staff's just been flat out bad. And I don't think that I'm quite there right now either.
No.
But you look at how people, I think, dismiss how important that is. You look at Denver this past season, they're probably the best litmus test for needing experienced, like qualified, proven coaches on the staff in order for things to work. Go look at Nathaniel Hackett's staff
Dude, it was
last
all
year.
first year guys.
All first year guys, just guys with no track record, no proven ability to do it at this level. And like you saw things, it got off to a bumpy start and then it just fell off the rails. And I think that that's something that, you avoid situations like that when you got guys in the building that have done it at least at a high level. Leftwich, it was definitely BA's offense. I mean, even last year they were running BA stuff for the most part. I felt like, I mean, I'm not one to dive into the all 22 weekly for the Bucks for no reason, but there's a lot of the same stuff schematically, and BA has done that at a high level for a long time. So incorporating some new ideas, maybe bringing some stuff over from BA and putting it in this offense, I don't think that that's a bad idea whatsoever. It's just I don't know how the coaching carousel stuff's going to play out and where he could potentially land.
No, I don't either. And I think that's a wait and see type situation. It would not be today or tomorrow or next week or whatever. But I also don't know if anybody's going to be hollering to Byron Leftwich to be like, hey, come coach, come be our OC, come be our whatever.
He may have to settle for something other than
that's
OC.
what I'm saying. He might be in a situation where the Steelers call him and say, hey, look at man, like, you want to come help regroup this offense, sit a year with a young quarterback, hopefully prove yourself. And, you could be the next Brian Flores who's getting offers, because that's the thing. Like we've talked about this before. You take a year off of football, no matter what it is, like Cliff Kingsbury going to Thailand, the smartest thing you could do, because in a year and 2 years, people will totally forget it. He will get one ridiculous offer from somewhere and he'll be a head coach again. That's just what happens in the NFL. And I think
the Steelers benefit from that,
and they do exactly.
So I'm definitely down for, that situation playing itself out like that.
Yeah, me too. And I think it felt good to finally like hear it from Rooney's mouth to kind of feel like, okay, this isn't a bunch of fans or people on the radio or whatever, spilling out ideas. It's like,
Sure.
they'll consider it. They actually will consider it. Yeah, I think that's huge. All right, we're heading out of here, guys. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Find us anywhere you get your podcasts. Make sure to go check out Derek and Nick's mock draft on Steelers Draft Talk on the YouTube channel, on all the podcast networks, everything. And check out all of mine and Derek's work at allsteelers.com. Derek's got almost every other day dropping a new scouting report, so make sure that you guys are checking those out. We'll be back on Monday. Peace.